Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. I am your host, guiding you through cases that have moved through the courts and reached at least one conclusion. But they've left the public divided. And these are not your typical cut and dried cases. Oh no. These are the ones where the facts may be clear, but the truth, that can be a whole nother story. Now imagine this. A well-known actor is walking home late at night in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Chicago. And then suddenly, two men appear. They are masked, and they are shouting racial slurs and pro-Trump slogans. They're throwing a noose around his neck. They are dousing him with bleach. This is a horrifying scene, one that sends shockwaves across the country. Social media lights up with messages of outrage and support for this actor, condemning the rising tide of hate crimes in America. But as investigators dig deeper, cracks in this story begin to form. What initially appeared to be an act of racially and politically motivated violence begins to unravel into something far more sinister. The attackers, it turns out, are not strangers. They're two men that this actor knows well. Men he allegedly paid to stage the assault. And suddenly the narrative flips. Is this a hate crime or is this a hoax? Well, this is exactly what happened in the Jussie Smollett case. What started as a shocking report of a hate crime turned into a polarizing legal battle over deceit and privilege and public perception. In this episode, we are going to dive deep into this controversial case to answer the question, when does the court of public opinion matter more than the verdict itself? Stick with me here, because by the end, you're going to have the chance to decide for yourself, was justice served, or is there more to the story? On January 29th in 2019, actor Jussie Smollett, best known for his role on the hit TV show Empire, called Chicago police to report a violent attack. Smollett alleged that two men assaulted him, tied a noose around his neck, poured bleach on him, and shouted slurs, including, "This is MAGA country." The incident, Smollett claimed, was a hate crime motivated by his race and sexuality. This was a horrible scene on a person, and it painted one political party in a negative light. This story garnered immediate attention, with celebrities and politicians and the general public rallying in support of Smollett. Social media exploded with hashtags like Justice for Jussie, while commentators condemned the attack as a sign of growing racial and political division in America. But within weeks, suspicions arose. The two suspects identified through surveillance footage weren't white men in MAGA hats. They were two black men, Olabinjo and Abimbola Osundairo. And before I go any further here, I just want to touch base on what perception was before this. A horrible crime by MAGA supporters, white men of the worst kind, attacking an innocent black man minding his own business in Chicago. This is what we as the public were presented with. Only a little bit later, we find out it's not that. But think about the outrage everyone had to go through while they were told the lie. This is what happens to the public on a daily basis. All right, let's keep going. As I was saying, these were not two white men attacking a black man. These were two black men that were attacking a black man. Now, under police interrogation, these brothers reveal that Smollett paid them, and only $3,500, let's be fair, was that enough, to stage this attack. According to their testimony, Smollett masterminded this hoax in an effort to boost his career and gain sympathy from the public. Smollett was charged with filing a false police report, along with other offenses. However, the initial deal allowed him to avoid jail time. It was in exchange for community service and forfeiting his bond. But then, this leniency outraged the public, leading to renewed scrutiny of the case. And in 2021, Smollett was convicted on 5 felony counts of disorderly conduct for lying to police, and he was sentenced to 150 days in jail, but then was later released pending appeal, reigniting public debate over privilege and justice and accountability. The case of Jussie Smollett isn't just about a crime or a courtroom verdict. This is a story about the interplay between race and privilege and the court of public opinion. To truly understand why this case became so polarizing, let's start by laying out the timeline of events. On January 29th of 2019, Jussie Smollett, known for his role on Empire, reports that he's the victim of a violent hate crime in Chicago. According to Smollett, 2 men attack him late at night, shouting racial and homophobic slurs, pouring bleach on him, and tying a noose around his neck. Smollett also alleged the attackers yelled, "This is MAGA country," before fleeing the scene. The nation's reaction was swift and overwhelming, with celebrities and activists, public figures, they all rallied around Smollett, denouncing the attack as a symbol of the growing racial and political divides in America. But then, within weeks, evidence surfaced that called Smollett's story into question. Surveillance footage led investigators to 2 men, the brothers. The brothers, who were black and had worked with Smollett as extras on Empire, revealed under questioning that Smollett had paid them $3,500 to stage the attack. That is quite the acting gig in front of the world for only $3,500. But okay, they do this happens. But as the investigation unraveled, it became clear that Smollett's account was not only false, but orchestrated. The Osundairo brothers testified that Smollett planned the hoax as a publicity stunt to boost his career and gain sympathy. Smollett was soon indicted on 16 felony counts, including filing a false police report. However, in March of 2019, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx's office made the stunning decision to drop all charges against Smollett in a deal that required him to forfeit his $10,000 bond and then complete community service. The announcement of this deal sparked outrage, with many accusing Foxx's office of granting Smollett preferential treatment. Now, Foxx had recused herself from the case earlier due to communications with a member of Smollett's family, and critics questioned whether her recusal was genuine or if political connections played a role. The backlash was intense, leading to the appointment of a special prosecutor to review the case. The prosecutor later determined that Foxx's office had mishandled the matter, calling the decision to drop the charges a major failure of the public trust. Does anybody remember all this? All right, in 2021, Smollett gets convicted on 5 felony accounts of disorderly conduct and sentenced to 150 days in jail. However, his sentence was suspended pending appeal, reigniting public debate over how privilege and connections can absolutely influence justice. From the outset, the prosecution in Jussie Smollett's case painted a clear picture of deceit and manipulation. They argued that Smollett orchestrated the attack to capitalize on his status as both a public figure and a victim, believing it would boost his career and gain him public sympathy. The prosecution's case was bolstered by the cooperation of the brothers. The brothers provided detailed testimony about their involvement, recounting how Smollett paid them the $3,500 and then directed them to purchase supplies for the staged attack. including rope and that bleach. Surveillance footage captured the brothers buying these items, further corroborating their account. Prosecutors presented this as irrefutable evidence of premeditation on Smollett's part. Furthermore, the prosecution emphasized how Smollett's actions drained critical law enforcement resources. Dozens of officers and investigators worked tirelessly on what they believed to be a legitimate hate crime, only to discover it was a hoax. Prosecutors argued that this not only wasted public funds, okay, that's your funds, those are my funds, but it also undermined the credibility of genuine hate crime victims, because these things really do happen, and it's awful when it does. So this is awful that he did this. I mean, this potentially discourages others from coming forward, feeling like there'll be another Smollett. Will anyone believe them? Could it end up embarrassing? And that's terrible. Now, at the trial, the prosecution leaned heavily on the brothers' testimony, phone records linking Smollett to them, and the staged nature of the attack. They described Smollett as a man who acted out of selfishness and greed, willing to exploit racial and political divisions for his own personal gain. And the jury ultimately agreed, convicting Smollett on 5 counts of disorderly conduct. But Jussie Smollett obviously had a defense team, and they framed Smollett as a victim, not just of this alleged attack, but of the flawed investigation, it said, and a rush to judgment. They claimed that the brothers were just unreliable as witnesses, and that they fabricated their testimony so that they could avoid prosecution for their own role in this incident. Smollett's attorneys argued that the prosecution relied on circumstantial evidence and assumptions. With no direct proof that Smollett orchestrated the attack, they questioned the brothers' motives, suggesting they targeted Smollett for personal gain or revenge. The defense also claimed that the $3,500 payment, that was for personal training services. It was not to stage a crime. Throughout the trial, Smollett maintained his innocence, testifying he was the victim of a real attack. His legal team accused the media and law enforcement of unfairly vilifying him, turning what should have been a standard investigation into a sensationalized public spectacle. And they argued that Smollett had already suffered enough damage to his reputation and his career, and further punishment was, well, just unnecessary. Ultimately, the defense could not overcome, though, the weight of evidence presented by the prosecution. However, their arguments highlighted how high-profile cases can become tainted by public and media scrutiny, potentially affecting the fairness of the trial itself. And this is a real point. But just like using a racial attack to benefit himself, here we have the defense trying to use the public and the media as something that tainted this case against him, also, of course, something in his defense. But using something real in a way that is not legitimate takes this thing to just a whole nother level. It adds pieces to this mess. The Jussie Smollett case became a lightning rod for controversy, not only because of the crime itself, but because of how it was amplified and dissected in the media. From the moment these allegations surfaced, the story dominated the headlines. Social media platforms erupted with those hashtags, Justice for Jussie, while celebrities and politicians and activists publicly condemned the attack. In the early days, the narrative was clear. Smollett was the victim of a horrific hate crime, and his story needed to be heard. However, as this investigation progressed, the tone shifted, as we know. When evidence emerged suggesting that this attack was a hoax, well, media outlets quickly pivoted. The same platforms that had once championed Smollett's story turned against him without any feeling about it, and this fueled public outrage again. Critics argued that Smollett had exploited deeply ingrained social issues, which I was just talking about. He's exploiting racism, homophobia, and political division for his own personal gain. The media's role in shaping public perception became a key part of the controversy, with accusations that outlets had either rushed to judgment or sensationalized the case for clicks and views. Again, not caring if we, the public, actually have the facts. They just want us to have an opinion, to be outraged, to be divided, and to keep watching. Their role in shaping public perception here was incredible in this case. The rapid shift in the narrative, though, left the public divided again. Many felt betrayed. They believed what they heard as fact. They were angered that Smollett's actions could potentially undermine the credibility of real hate crime victims. Others, they were questioning whether the backlash was disproportionately harsh, pointing to the media frenzy as an example of how high-profile cases often can spiral out of control. Another major point of contention in the Smollett case was the perception of privilege and favoritism. When Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx's office abruptly dropped all the charges in March of 19, the public was outraged. Foxx had already recused herself from the case after it was revealed she had communicated with a member of Smollett's family during the investigation. Critics argued that her decision to drop the charges, despite all of that evidence, was influenced by Smollett's connections as a celebrity. The special prosecutor later appointed to review the case did not mince words, calling the handling of the charges a major failure of public trust. This reinforced the idea that Smollett had received preferential treatment because of his fame and ties to influential figures in Chicago. For many, this was not just a case of individual wrongdoing, but a reflection of a broken system that often favors the wealthy and well-connected. And I need to point out that the media is so good that people almost refused to believe this. Some people out there, because what they heard the first time, they felt just had to be the truth. That's where we're at, people. You hear it once, you think it's true, you think it's all there is. But like in this case, there's always more to the story, and the public always deserves the truth. Now, the controversy did not end there. Even after Smollett's conviction in 21, his sentence was suspended pending appeal, and this further fueled perceptions that justice had not been fully served. This man just could not get punished. The public questioned why Smollett seemed to face fewer consequences compared to pretty much anyone else who might commit similar offenses without his resources or connections. One of the most lasting impacts of the Jussie Smollett case is the damage it may have caused to public trust in hate crime reporting. And this is something not everybody thought of. I mean, hate crimes are already notoriously underreported if you did not know, with many victims fearing disbelief, retaliation, the works if they come forward, maybe even canceling. In their own worlds, Smollett's actions added another layer of this skepticism, and critics argued that the hoax gave ammunition to those who already doubt victims' claims, potentially discouraging others from seeking the justice they deserve. Advocacy groups expressed concern about the ripple effects. Organizations that work with hate crime survivors feared that the public and law enforcement would become more hesitant to even believe victims, making it harder to address real incidents. Smollett's case, they argued, it didn't just harm his credibility. It harmed the broader movement against hate crimes by undermining the trust and urgency needed to confront these issues effectively. On the other side of the debate, some argued that the attention Smollett's case received was an anomaly. They pointed out that most hate crime cases, they don't involve celebrities, and that the heightened scrutiny in this instance does not reflect how these cases are typically handled. Nonetheless, the public remains divided over whether Smollett's actions created lasting damage or were simply a blip on the broader fight for justice. Beyond the specifics of this case, the Smollett saga sparked a broader conversation about how race and politics and privilege intersect in the justice system. This is happening all the time. The initial claims of a hate crime resonated deeply in a country grappling with racial tensions, political polarization, and a rise in reported hate-based violence. For many, Smollett's actions felt like a betrayal of the progress being made in addressing these issues. And at the same time, the case became a cultural flashpoint, dividing people along ideological lines. Some saw the hoax as evidence that concerns about racism and hate crimes are overblown, while others viewed the public backlash as disproportionately harsh, shaped by biases against Smollett's identity as a black gay man. The case became less about the facts and more about what it symbolized in the broader cultural wars. Even now, the Smollett case remains a litmus test for how people perceive justice. Was he an opportunist who exploited social tensions for personal gain? Or was he a scapegoat in a system that often treats high-profile defendants as symbols rather than individuals? There's so much going on in this case, and these questions continue to fuel debate, illustrating how the court of public opinion can shape the legacy of a case long after the legal proceedings have ended. The Jussie Smollett case is not just about an isolated incident. When we're looking at the bigger picture here, it's emblematic of a larger question that society grapples with every single day. How much should public opinion factor into the pursuit of justice? In a system built on evidence and legal processes and rules, there's little room for the voices of the people impacted by these very rulings. Yet, time and time again, public outcry has forced the legal system to reconsider decisions. When Cook County initially dropped the charges against Smollett, it wasn't the prosecutors or judges who demanded a second look. It was the public. The outrage, the demand for accountability, and the relentless pressure ultimately led to the appointment of a special prosecutor. And this wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last, that public opinion has acted as a catalyst for justice. But here's the dilemma, or one of them. Where does public opinion fit in a system designed to be impartial? Can we truly balance a measured approach of the courts with the immediate and often emotionally charged responses of the public? And should we? After all, public sentiment has its flaws. First of all, it is swayed by the media. What you think you know, you don't even know if you really know that. Yet we scream out with all our passion because we have taken a side. It's kind of funny, though, because when they look back on all of us taking our big side, they'll realize we didn't even know what was going on. That's kind of embarrassing. And if we have passions and real things we believe in, don't we deserve the truth so that we can make decisions? Because public opinion does have influence. But when someone's controlling your opinion, they're just getting you to agree with them. And so therefore you're not influencing anything you want, I guess is my point. You're influencing what you think you want if you're only going off what you're told. And public opinion deserves more than that. Another problem, though, with public opinion is it's prone to bias. And again, often driven by incomplete narratives. But we accept that, and again, we cry out in all of our passion with our partial narrative, our partial information. But we can't dismiss public opinion even though it is flawed. I mean, this would be dangerous. The Smollett case is a prime example of why public opinion matters. It matters because it holds people in power accountable, whether they are celebrities or public officials or even the prosecutors themselves. Without that scrutiny, many injustices might go unnoticed, swept under the rug in the name of procedural efficiency. And this brings us to an even bigger question. Do we need a system that formalizes the role of public opinion? Should there be a mechanism, a court of the people, to ensure their voices aren't just heard but acted upon? And if so, how do we prevent it from becoming a mob mentality, where justice is dictated by the loudest voices rather than the fairest solutions? And, of course, when anything becomes formalized, it can be bought and sold, and there's all kinds of things that can go on. Bribes, sways, incomplete information, false information. If we want the court of public opinion to matter, the public needs to take responsibility in knowing the facts. You want to know something, you need to go out and know it. You feel passionate about something, go find out if what you're passionate about even fits who you are. Do you know the facts? Public opinion can matter, but it only really, genuinely matters if that opinion is formed by correct information. And the public needs to go get that information because the media is giving you wherever they want to direct us. Let's review here. As of November 21st of 2024, just happened yesterday, the Illinois Supreme Court overturned Jussie Smollett's conviction for staging a hate crime against himself in 2019. The court ruled that prosecuting Smollett a second time after initial charges were dropped in a negotiated agreement violated his due process rights. Now, initially in 2019, Smollett faced charges for falsely reporting a hate crime. These charges were dropped after he agreed to forfeit his $10,000 bond and perform community service based on a deal. A deal because of connections. And this leads to public outcry, which leads to the appointment of a special prosecutor. This results in new charges and a 2021 conviction on those 5 counts of disorderly conduct. He gets 150 days in jail, but is released after 6 because of his appeal. Now, the recent Supreme Court decision has reignited public debate. Critics argue that Smollett's connections and celebrity status afforded him leniency that others don't get. Not you, not me. While supporters, though, they contend the ruling corrects a procedural error. This case continues to highlight the tensions between legal outcomes and public perception, raising questions about privilege and justice and accountability. And all right, as we close this chapter of the Jussie Smollett case, it's clear the story doesn't end with a legal ruling. It just doesn't. The real trial, the one unfolding in the court of public opinion, continues. This case isn't just about Smollett. It's about the countless other cases where legal outcomes don't align with public sentiment, where the people feel silenced by the technicalities of the law. It's about the balance or imbalance between what is legal and what feels just. I ask you to think about this. Should public opinion have a formal role in the justice system? Or is it enough that it exists as a check on power? Is the public using this power? And are they being responsible by using this power with the correct information, the actual facts? And how do we ensure that voices demanding accountability are even heard without compromising the integrity of legal processes, which are so important? And finally, what does this case mean to you? Whether you see Smollett as a privileged celebrity exploiting societal issues, or if you see him as a man caught in the crosshairs of a media-driven spectacle, one thing is certain. This case asks us all to reflect on the kind of justice we want in our world? Ask yourself and think about it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Jussie Smollett case in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. Stay safe out there. Stay curious and keep asking the difficult questions. Until next time, this is Alexis Knight.